I remember when I was a kid that every school was built over a cemetery cliché, but my elementary school actually was built over one. Ever since I was a little girl, I was heavily interested in the paranormal, and I always thought my school had something weird going on, and for some reason I was invested on proving to myself that I was right. In my 4th grade, my experiments began. I purposely stayed later in my classroom hoping something would happen. I was always alone for 10 minutes every day in the classroom, and I waited like 5 minutes in silence to hear something. I was slowly getting frustrated and decided to drop my experiments. One day it happened. I was alone in my classroom putting some things away in my locker space as quickly as possible so I could join my friends on the patio. My classroom was at the end of the hallway in the 2nd floor, so I was hurrying to catch up. I could hear the muffled voices of the other kids outside. In one instant, it was like a crowd of people talking out loud just hit me in the ears. I couldn't understand a bit of what they were saying, but it was loud, louder than a bunch of kids playing outside. I grabbed my backpack and ran outside. When I was just by the stairs, I closed my backpack and walked to my friends. I was freaked out, but I didn't say anything to anyone. I didn't want a bunch of other kids to stay late in the classroom with me, and if someone told a teacher, they would think I was doing it for attention. Some weeks passed and I wasn't staying late anymore because I didn't want to hear those voices again. One day I thought it would be interesting to leave a piece of paper with a message for the ghost hidden behind my books. I made sure no one was there and that nobody could see it in plain sight. And sure enough, I received answers written in the paper. There were simple sentences and yes and no answers. Since my mom was a teacher at the school, I was the first kid to arrive to the classroom. So before anyone else could come, I would open my message and see the answer. Eventually I stopped doing that, because it felt wrong and I could tell the ghosts were getting a bit annoyed. It wasn't much, but it was enough that made me believe in ghosts, and made me think I was as awesome as those hunters on TV. To start out, I'm not exactly sure what it was that was terrorizing my roommates and me, but I think it was demonic. So back in December 2017, I had finally found a new place to live and was moving out of my ex-fiance's apartment. It was in the student housing complex that has tons of houses in it, and you lease out by the rooms. Anyway, I was 20 at the time, and took over the lease for this other girl that lived there. I moved into this 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath house that was 2 stories. 3 other girls lived there with me that I didn't know. It started out as smoothly as I could give, that I had to literally rebuild my life, and I was in a strange new house with people I didn't know. Nothing really happened to me at first. However, it was certainly gradual. Probably the first thing I noticed was the air and atmosphere felt thick and heavy all the time, and I never felt like I was alone. I constantly felt fear or some other negative emotion. I just thought it was because of the situation, and I would get over it. Once I bounced back, it did not. Then I would hear clawing, scratching, and thudding at random times. My bedroom was on the top floor, and the door to the attic was just outside my room. We called maintenance on multiple occasions to get an exterminator out. They finally checked it out and could not find a single thing wrong in the attic. No nest, droppings, dead animals, insects, etc. Then, the breaker box would constantly have to be reset. Every single day, the breaker would have to be reset at least 3 times, but it usually was more. How it would happen is a section of the lights would turn off in one room. We would reset the breaker for whatever room it was, and then it would be a different set of lights. We would reset it and wash, rinse, repeat several times a day. It did not matter the time of year, weather, or anything. We finally had the complex get an electrician out there, and he said there was nothing wrong with the breaker box or anything like that. It was absolutely terrifying. Sometimes you would be in the bathroom or shower and the lights would just go off in your bathroom, and that's that. There were no rhyme or reason. Another thing that started happening was things would fly off my wall. I could never see it admittedly, but I knew they did just based on how, where they landed, and what the object was. Whatever the entity was, it did not like my Mardi Gras mask that I had on my shelf. There was no reason for this thing to fall off. I had it anchored to this shelf with books and a topper in front of it. Either way, sometimes I would turn around to walk out of the room, even if I just left for a few minutes, and find the mask 6 to 10 feet away from the shelf. Doesn't make sense because it was heavy and an odd shape, so I shouldn't have been able to roll that far if it somehow magically fell off. Side note, my room is carpeted, so that adds another obstacle. I wanted to test it, so I put a lot of noisy plastic stuff right underneath the shelf, cellophane mostly. But anything that was loud, crinkly, and would definitely hear. But I never heard it fall onto the pile of the cellophane, even though it continued to wind up, like 6 to 10 feet away from the wall. There were a lot of minor things as well. Drops in temperature, shadows whispering downstairs, but we could never tell what they were saying. My roommates all got sleep paralysis, and it would always be one of the worst fears. I never slept well. Things would disappear and reappear, strange sounds, etc. Another thing is I find and resell various oddities. So I had a vintage Ouija board there, but I sold it within the same week I got it. Never even opened the thing, just sold it as it is to make a profit. During the few days I had it, I would awaken at night, and as crazy as it seems, something was telling me to open it and play with it. Felt like the thoughts weren't my own because I have never and would never play one. I never caved in, but I thought that it was odd. However, it started coming to a head after I had been there a few months, and it was just before summer break. My roommates had a big party there, and I invited a friend to it. My friend told me years later that when they went downstairs after the party, so about 4 a.m. it was, to get some water, that they said they heard hundreds of flies flying towards them, but they couldn't see any. And they said while this happened, the room smelled of rotten meat. There weren't any flies or rotting meat in my house, FYI. So we moved out of the house after our lease was up, and we moved to another house within the same complex and haven't had any problems. Still get creeped out when I drive by the house on Winter Park Drive. POV. When I was younger, me and my sister and my then best friend were really curious of abandoned houses. I live in a quite freshly built suburban and are surrounded with dark spruced forests. My parents warned me to never go off the road or I might get lost in the woods. One day my friend, me and my sister decided to go to do a photo shoot of pine trees and stuff for a school project of mine. I had to take a picture of a tree, name it, and put it in a portfolio. We were walking in the pathway leading through the forest, and my sister saw the final kind of tree we had to take a picture of. It was a little bit further into the forest, but you could see the road, so I decided to go for it. When I was done taking the picture, I noticed a building about 20 meters off behind the trees. I asked my sister and friend to come look at it, and we headed inside. I put the camera on and started filming. The building was not quite a house. It had no windows. Only way inside was these two massive doors. There were a lot of trash inside and creepy stuff like hospital beds. It looked like somebody was using this place at their personal garage can. It was quite dark inside, so we didn't see very clearly. The walls were sprayed with things like "kill yourself." Suddenly, my sister shushed and pointed at the ceiling. There was a loop of rope in the ceiling. We all stared with terrified looks on our faces, then heard it. Horrible scream of pain. We didn't see anybody. My friend said that we should leave immediately and then ran off. A few days went by and I forgot about the whole thing. Then I was clearing my room. I saw the camera and I looked at the video. And the last minute I heard my friend saying that we need to leave, but not the bloody scream. I listened to it twice. No scream. To this day, none of us can explain what happened because all we heard a loud scream of a girl. Why wasn't it on tape? We never went to that building again. I might still have the video. I'll add it if I find it. This is my third spooky encounter. That's all of them so far, but I'm only 40, so we'll see. The others were collaborated. This one is not. This one was just me. I'd honestly never have been so scared. I quit my job in the big city, let's say Toronto, and I bought a house on the outskirts of a wealthy neighborhood in my hometown. We were zoned inside the wealthy neighborhood more as a technicality and good property value. 80-year-old home, galvanized pipes, knob and tub, pink tub, and toilet. 1960s linoleum as a kitchen counter. Basement was a real dungeon. Got a good price. I ripped out the bathroom and kitchen and did a full update. Ran new electrical, new plumbing, new floors, new roof. Took a while. I was living there for about 3 months during the renovations. The plan was to rent the place out first week in November, and I'm still finishing up details in the house. Still living there because it's unrented. I don't have internet apart from a modal hotspot. I'm upstairs in the master bedroom watching a film on my laptop. I hear a thump and a distinct voice downstairs. It's 11 p.m., November in Canada, dark and cold. I hear more voices, 2 voices. Not trying to be quiet either. I looked at the window wondering if they could be coming from outside, but it sounded like they were in the kitchen. This is when I was 37. I'd given thought to how I'd act in a home invasion. I must say it feels different when you're there alone. It feels terrifying. Nonetheless, I got out of bed and deliberately walked heavily and slammed open the bedroom door. Stomped down the stairs into the kitchen and shouted, "You gotta leave. Whoever you are, you need to go. You need to get out of here." I flipped on the lights in the kitchen. There was no one there. I walked in the dining room and living room and flipped on the lights. No one. Then I heard very distinctly 2 voices coming from the basement. I went down into the basement holding a damn kitchen knife, screaming at whoever it was, telling them to get out, telling them they were going to get hurt. The basement was a dungeon. I had to feel around and pull a few cords to get the lights on. I reluctantly looked around, but there was no one there. The next thing I heard rang out louder than anything previously. Floor shaking. Thump, thump, thump sound, like the stairs in the 2nd floor. From the basement, it sounded like Shaquille O'Neal just stomped up the stairs, 1 floor above. I didn't go upstairs until daybreak. Weird as it was, I had my kitchen knife, and I checked out the basement. Dungeon or not, it felt safe, so I stayed. Morning came, I went upstairs, and nothing was taken. Nothing was moved. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but I wanted to create a Reddit to where I could share my experiences with people who can relate and maybe give me some advice. The old house my family and I moved into was new. No one lived in this house before us. It was the best and worst years of my life. I was just entering high school at the time, and it was a great neighborhood, and the house had good vibes. And then all of a sudden I started suffering from massive panic attacks. I never felt anxious, but it always happened at night randomly. I didn't think much about it. I thought maybe I was just stressed about the mundane things happening in my life at that time. But the things started to get weird. My mom worked 2 jobs, and my dad woke up around 4 a.m., so he was in bed by 9. So I was basically home alone. I started to hear 3 knocks down the hallway walls as night, and a foul smell would randomly appear and then disappear just as quick. The smell was shit mixed with sulfur. I never wanted to be alone because I felt like I was being watched even though I was the only one in the living room. My phone would disappear and reappear. I thought I was losing my mind. It wasn't until I went over to a friend's house more and more because I didn't want to be alone. I finally got confirmation that I wasn't going crazy. I was with my friend, we call her Alice, and we were listening to music and eating pepperoni slices, and her lights started to flicker. We didn't think much of it, to be honest, until we heard a loud knock on her door. Alice figured it was her mom and got up to open the door, only to discover her mom wasn't there. This is the hard to believe part of my story. After the knock on Alice's door, we slightly freaked out, but we decided to continue with our evening. I got a phone call from my dad later on that night. He was asking if I was playing a prank on him, and if I was actually at Alice's house. I asked him what was he talking about, and he said that he came home, entering through the garage in the house, and announced that I was bored at Alice's house and decided to come home. My dad said he responded to saying he was glad that I was home and asked if I was hungry, but he got no response. My mom was at work, so my dad was home alone at this time. My dad then stated that he was confused about how I got home and then asked if Alice's mom drove me back to the house, but he got no response. He said he got up to go look for me and I wasn't there. He said he was freaked out and assumed I must be messing with him, but I told my dad that I don't have garage door opener and I always come through the front door, and I even put my friend Alice on the phone to confirm that I was at her house. Needless to say, my dad was freaked out. After we moved a few years later, we moved due to the issues with finances, not the paranormal. He unexplainable pretty much dissipated. It has been 5 years since then with no paranormal experiences. Until a few months ago, my dog passed away. He was dying of old age and I was crying about having to put him down in the following morning. I was sitting with him in the living room and a marker was thrown at my face from the kitchen. Everyone was asleep. Nothing has happened since the night with my dog, but it makes me wonder what this entity wants and why. It seems to have followed me from my old house 5 years ago and seemed to have disappeared only to reappear while my dog is dying.